When a crime has been committed, any good investigator will ask the question, who benefits? So let's apply this reasoning to the main parties associated with the events of 9/11. Osama bin Laden. 5 days after 9/11, bin Laden stated that he had no knowledge of the attacks. He also stated that the attacks appear to have been carried out by individuals with their own motivation. This statement was aired only once on Al Jazeera TV on the 16th of September 2001. Before 9/11, Osama bin Laden had lived as a fugitive, but he was a wealthy fugitive who had enjoyed relative freedom outside of the USA. He was even able to obtain kidney dialysis treatment at an American hospital in Dubai just prior to 9/11. And within Afghanistan, his country of residence, he was protected by the Taliban, who had full control of the country. However, after 9/11, bin Laden's life became increasingly worse. For example, he was now unable to stay within the comfort zone of Afghanistan because the country had been invaded by the coalition forces. Bin Laden was also unable to freely visit other countries for hospital treatment because those countries would risk being accused of harboring a wanted terrorist. He would therefore have to spend even more of his money on protection, plus his future options would be extremely limited in terms of survival, finding a place to stay, finding the hospital treatment he needed, and planning future terror attacks. Numerous news reports from 2002 stated that bin Laden had in fact died. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, Osama bin Laden scores 0. Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda was created by the CIA during the 1980s for the purpose of fighting off an attempted Russian invasion of Afghanistan. The CIA funded Al-Qaeda and supplied them with the weapons and intelligence they needed to ward off the Russian threat. When the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan in the late 1980s, the CIA continued to fund Al-Qaeda, and many of its operatives were used as CIA assets. These operatives were used as double agents for use in anti-terrorism drills within the USA and for covert military operations. Since 9/11, Al-Qaeda would have found it almost impossible to carry out major terrorist attacks in countries like the USA. For example, the Patriot Act in the USA allows the government to spy on all phone and email communications. So life for any terrorist organization will have become immeasurably worse since 9/11. In addition to this, the invasion of Afghanistan and the loss of so many of Al-Qaeda's main operatives would have seriously disrupted and undermined Al-Qaeda's ability to function as a terror group in the future. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, Al-Qaeda scores 0. Saddam Hussein. Up until 9/11, Saddam enjoyed a relatively comfortable life as the dictator of Iraq. However, since 9/11, Saddam's life had become progressively worse. Firstly, because of the constant insinuations that Saddam had something to do with 9/11, and secondly because of the accusations that Saddam possessed weapons of mass destruction. Within 18 months of 9/11, Iraq was invaded and Saddam was reduced to living in squalid conditions whilst on the run from his invaders. Shortly after the invasion of Iraq, Saddam was captured after he was found hiding in a small underground spider hole in a derelict house in Tikrit. He was held as a prisoner for 3 years before being tried and hanged. The Iraqi court found Saddam guilty of crimes that he committed during the 1980s. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, Saddam Hussein scores less than 0. So, out of the 3 parties who've had the finger pointed at them by the Bush administration for complicity in the 9/11 attacks, none of them have benefited politically, financially, or strategically from what happened on 9/11. In fact, the exact opposite is the case. The lives of these 3 parties have been turned upside down to the point where they can no longer function as they did before 9/11. So who did benefit from 9/11? Larry Silverstein. This man became the leaseholder of the World Trade Center complex just a few weeks before 9/11. Silverstein faced the daunting task of having to remove the illegal asbestos that covered every steel beam in the Twin Towers. This job would have cost over $1 billion. When Silverstein took possession of the World Trade Center complex, he reworked the insurance policy on the complex to specifically cover terrorist attacks. After 9/11, Silverstein received $7 billion compensation from his insurers. That's a massive profit on his original $15 million investment. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, Larry Silverstein scores 10. The project for the new American century. In September of 2000, these men produced a neocon manifesto called Project for the New American Century, or PNAC for short. This manifesto detailed their ambitions and intentions for America in the 21st century. It called for the transformation of America into tomorrow's dominant force through permanent military bases in the Middle East. It also wanted to establish America as a global constabulary, unchallenged by the UN and the rest of the world. It also called for regime change in countries like Iraq and Afghanistan. But it said that fulfilling these ambitions would be a long process unless there was a catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. Within 12 months of producing the PNAC manifesto, the events of 9/11 took place, and the new neocon administration was able to carry out virtually every ambition called for in their PNAC manifesto. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, the PNAC group scores 10. Dick Cheney. The current Vice President and former CEO of Halliburton still receives a multi-year deferred salary package from Halliburton, whose stock has increased considerably since the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq. The arms industry. There is nothing better for the arms industry than a war. Since 9/11, billions of dollars worth of missiles and bombs have been used and have to be replaced, and President Bush is asking for and receiving additional defense funds. He is the man to spend those billions of dollars and give them to his friends and business partners, who in turn support his political career, not least with money. As part of the Carlyle Group, the Bush family have already gained huge profits from the company's manufacture of weapons and military bases since 9/11. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, Bush, Cheney and the arms industry scores 10. US oil companies. Again, a business field where President Bush is involved. Over 60% of the world's oil fields happen to be in the Middle East. The current supply of oil used by the US, which is the world's biggest oil consumer, will be exceeded by demand within the next 10 years or so. Without gaining control of that 60% of oil in the Middle East, the US economy would soon collapse. So it is essential for America to gain control of those oil fields in the Middle East as soon as possible. Not just for its own use, but also to control the supply of that oil to other countries such as China, which will soon become the most powerful nation on earth. Since the 1980s, US oil interests have wanted to build an oil pipeline from the Caspian oil fields down through Afghanistan. They wanted to do this in order to control the supply of oil to countries such as China. However, the Taliban, who occupied Afghanistan at the time, refused to allow the US to build this pipeline. However, just one day after America installed its own government in Afghanistan, the contract was signed to construct the pipeline they desperately wanted. So when it comes to the question of who benefited from 9/11, on a scale of 0 to 10, the American oil companies scored 10. The US government. The terrorist attacks on 9/11 gave the US government the excuse to further pursue its goal of a new world order by means of war. The Patriot Act allows the government to spy on the communications of every citizen. It also allows the sampling of DNA of any person convicted of any crime of violence. And it also allows arrest on suspicion, without a warrant, without probable cause, in secret, without notifying anybody, and without the right to see a lawyer. So the people who've been blamed for 9/11, i.e. Osama bin Laden, Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein, have gained nothing from 9/11 and lost everything as a result of 9/11. Whereas the people who pointed the finger of blame, i.e. Bush, Cheney and the PNAC group, gained everything they had wanted as a direct result of 9/11. The same is true of the World Trade Center leaseholder Larry Silverstein, and of course US oil and arms companies.